Hello students. So today I will be going over my presentation, my lesson plan. So my lesson plan is intended for 8th graders learning English language arts, also known as ELA. So, first things first, let's get into my teacher instructions. So what are teacher instructions? Teacher instructions are pretty much just the outline of my lesson plan. And so you can see here that we have a standard. The standard is pretty much just the goal that we're trying to perfect, the action that we want to work on. And inside that standard, we have 3 different objectives, which are pretty much 3 different steps that we want to be able to really look into and work on. And by perfecting these objectives, it'll allow us to be able to effectively work on and perfect really the standard. And so my standard involves citations because I'm working with 8th graders in English language arts. So my standard is cite the textual evidence that most strongly supports an analysis of what a text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. So if you look at that standard, what we need to do is we need to be able to cite correctly, and we need to be able to take analysis out of a piece of text, and we need to be able to analyze that text in a solid way. So there are 3 steps to being able to complete that standard. Objective number 1, students can cite their textual evidence. Number 2, students can make inferences about their textual evidence. And then finally, our third objective, students can find the strongest evidence to support an analysis of a piece of text. So here you have your 3 learning objectives, and in order to accomplish your standard, you need to be able to completely perfect all 3 of your objectives. And then here we have a small overall description of what I am trying to accomplish in my lesson plan. So if we go back to our lesson plan, here we have an open house letter for our parents, which parents can get into if they want to. The link is there. Here we just have an intro. We have our objectives, we have our standard. That's pretty much it. And then those are still also here on the front of my page. So now we're going to get into the lesson plan itself. Step 1, engagement, one of the 5 E's. So engagement pretty much is our way of starting off the lesson. It's pretty much hooking our students. Basically engaging our students. We want to hook them in. We want to get them started. We want to get the basics into their mind. And the basics of pretty much citing, because citing is the topic that we are trying to accomplish. So pretty much here on the left, you have the description of what we're doing in class. Then on the right, we pretty much just have the steps you need to be able to complete. So here I'll read off. So for class today, the goal is for you to explore what fake news is. This will allow us to gain an understanding of evidence and what makes it strong and what makes it poor. Eventually, we want to be able to discover strong evidence and connect it to our claims and our ratings. So here I have one of my first tools that I've used to help my students in the engagement process, to help just hook them in and get them started on learning about what citations are. So here we have my fake news exploration. And to understand what citing is pretty much just what you need to do after you complete a piece of writing, because you need to be able to cite properly, because if you don't, you can get in trouble. It's pretty much plagiarizing. And so in our world, we have these things called fake news. Fake news is just media that is false, and false media could spread a lot of rumors. It could spread a lot of nonsense, which is why we need to be able to determine what is real and what is fake, which helps us also with citing, because when we cite, we want to be able to cite information that is true. So if we scroll through here, we have YouTube videos, and under each source we have a caption. We have a YouTube video explaining how false news can spread, so the basics behind fake news. Then we have The Onion. This is a fake news site. We want to be able to identify that. Then we have another YouTube video. Then we have an article, a credible article. We have an infographic. If you just keep scrolling through, you have a bunch of sources showing you what fake news is and how to identify it. And so then, my students, we're gonna have a synchronous meeting on Zoom so we could talk about some things that we learned. And then we'll go into step number 2. Step 2 is exploration. Exploration is pretty much a piggyback off of engagement, because engagement is when you just pretty much want to get hooked into the material. Exploration is after you have that first little taste, is when you really want to go out and explore and be able to learn more of the material. So today, in this part of the lesson, it's more of an asynchronous part, and we have an ed puzzle for the students. It's free response, multiple choice questions. It's not supposed to be very difficult for the students. It's just to kind of get you thinking a little bit. So here in our ed puzzle, we have a video, and you have multiple choice questions. If you look here where my pointer is, we have multiple choice questions, open-ended questions, a little bit of them, and pretty much as you go through this video here, you're learning about what does it mean to cite evidence. Pretty straightforward. What is citing? What is evidence? How do you do it? So that's a little bit more of exploration after you get that little bit of a hook. So next we have explanation. This is the next part of my lesson plan as I explain to my students what exactly is going on. So here I'll read off again. I provided a link to my Screenomatic for your lesson today and a podcast as well. You should watch the video and listen as I go over our standard learning objectives and take notes as I practice some of our learning objectives. This class will be asynchronous today. So pretty much on my YouTube link, you can see a Screenomatic of me going through a presentation. Presentations on citations and interpreting evidence. It's pretty much me going over the content that we're learning in class. You'll be looking at me practicing citations, me showing you what's in a citation, and me giving you an example, another practice of how to cite evidence. So I give you a quote, and I have my students take out information from it. And so then next, we have step 4, elaboration. Elaboration, that step is pretty much going off of the material, the content that we got into in the explanation phase. And we elaborate on that content and go a little bit deeper. Why is it important? What exactly are we learning? And I pretty much just take a second step off of step 3 and just take a deeper dive and let my students really get into the nitty-gritty portions of the content. And so I've got 2 infographics here. I'll look at the first one. Pretty much in this infographic, we are learning about citations. So in step 3, we looked at Frankenstein. I quoted Frankenstein and we practiced citing it and interpreting evidence. So we look about how do we cite. These are some things that you need. You need an author, source date, article published, name of blah, blah, blah. And then we just have more about how to cite. This is the list of things that you need to be able to know. That's the order. The importance of citing. Why do we need to cite? Here's a reason given here. Then we'll look at infographic number 2. Pretty much in this, we're looking at textual evidence, a guide into unpacking text. So here are pretty much just steps you need to go to when you're brainstorming prompts, because evidence is important because you use evidence to help back yourself up when you're writing essays or pretty much anything. And so you need to be able to unpack it thoroughly, and you need to be able to use the right kind of evidence. And after you get your evidence, that's when you cite. But pretty much, here are some things that you would do if you were trying to find evidence. So, unpacking it, here's another quote. There we go. That's a practice citation. And yeah. Finally, into step number 5, evaluation. So, the evaluation portion is pretty much the teacher's way of deciding whether or not you were able to understand the material that we covered in the lesson plan. So an evaluation could be a game, it could be a test, it could be a quiz, it could be a project, it could be any sort of any kind of activity that pretty much just tells the teacher whether or not you understood the material and whether or not you're able to accomplish perfecting the standard. And so for me in my class, I decided to put together a Kahoot. And so play as a guest, continue as a guest, classic, pretty much. There it is, you get in the Kahoot, and yeah, that's pretty much it. There will be questions, different kinds of questions. Pretty much asking whether or not the students learn the material. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We've covered the 5 E's: engagement, exploration, explanation, elaboration, and evaluation. And if there are any other questions you have about the lesson plan, feel free to reach out to me. And if not, thank you. Thank you for watching this video as I explained to you the 5 E's in my lesson plan.